Welcome back to UGC Net English class. In the previous class, we discussed one of the novellas written by Charles Dickens. That is, The Chimes. Today we are going to discuss the biography of the famous modern English poet T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was born in 1888 and he passed away in 1965. His full name was Thomas Stearns Eliot. Thomas Stearns Eliot. His pet name was Tom. He was a poet, essayist, publisher, playwright, literary critic, and also an editor. And he is considered one of the 20th century's major poets. And he is a central figure in English language modernist poetry. He is a poet of the modern symbolist metaphysical tradition. So in short, we can say he is the representative of the modern symbolist metaphysical tradition of poetry. He described himself as classicist in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. So this is important to remember. T.S. Eliot called himself as a classicist in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri, America. So basically, T.S. Eliot was born in America. He was an American citizen. Then he abandoned his American citizenship and accepted the British citizenship. Eliot credited his hometown with fueling his literary vision. So even after coming to Britain, he made it clear to the readers or the public that his inspiration for his poetry, the basic inspiration is his own place, Missouri, America. So as according to him, it is self-evident that St. Louis affected me more deeply than any other environment has ever done. So his place, St. Louis, Missouri, America, that he considers the primary inspiration for his writings. He was born in a prominent Boston Brahmin family. His parents were Henry Bear Eliot and Charlotte Champ Stearns. Parents were Henry Bear Eliot and Charlotte Champ Stearns. His first wife was Vivian Haywood, who was his first wife, and then he had a love interest. He fell in love with Mary Trevelyan. He was in love with Mary Trevelyan, but later he married, for a second time, he married Esme Valerie Fletcher. So his first wife, Vivian Haywood, his second wife, Esme Valerie Fletcher. And he had no children with either of his wives. So with his two wives, he had no children. The relationship with Bertrand Russell ruined his first marriage. So another writer, Bertrand Russell, kept a secret relationship with his first wife. First wife was Vivian Haywood Eliot. So with her, the writer or the critic, Bertrand Russell, kept a relation and the marriage ruined. and also because of her physical and mental illness. His first wife had physical and mental problems, Vivian Haywood Eliot, so he divorced her. And Eliot later said, why we discuss this? Because it is important, because Eliot later said that, to her, the marriage brought no happiness. To me, it brought the state of mind out of which came the wasteland. So, according to Eliot, one of the inspirations for his greatest poems, The Wasteland, was the ruined relationship with his wife, Vivian Haywood Eliot. That is what he mentions here. To her, that means to Vivian Haywood, the marriage brought no happiness. To me, it brought the state of mind out of which came the wasteland. Michael Hastings wrote the play Tom and Viv. So, based on this relationship with his first wife, Eliot. Tom means the pet name of T.S. Eliot. So, based on his relationship with his first wife, Vivian Eliot, a playwright has written one play. This is important. Remember, Michael Hastings based his first marriage life for his play. So, Michael Hastings' play, Tom and Viv. Tom and Viv. Viv means Vivian Haywood Eliot. T.S. Eliot's physical limitation as a child led to his interest towards literature. So as a child, he was physically limited. He had so many physical problems as a child. So he naturally turned towards his books, and thus he was inspired by the famous literature of the period. He began to write poetry when he was 14 under the influence of Edward Fitzgerald's translation of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. So he began writing poetry at the age of 14 because he was very much impressed with the work, the Rubaiyat, written by Omar Khayyam. And it was then available through a translation by Edward Fitzgerald. Edward Fitzgerald had translated the work, the Rubaiyat, to English. So this inspired Eliot to write. And his first published poem was A Fable for Feasters, which was in 1905. T.S. Eliot's first published poem was A Fable for Feasters, 1905. And in the same year, he also published 3 short stories. That means in 1905, Birds of Prey, A Tale of a Bill, and The Man Who Was King. So remember, in 1905, he published his works. First of all, a poem titled A Fable for Feasters, then 3 short stories. Birds of Prey, A Tale of a Bill, and The Man Who Was King. And his first poetry collection was titled Prufrock and Other Observations. It was in 1917. In 1917, his first poetry collection appeared. So his first poem was A Fable for Feasters. And a first poetry collection, Prufrock and Other Observations, 1917. And his most famous poem is probably The Wasteland. So The Wasteland is considered his most famous poem. But Eliot considers another work as his best work. So according to T.S. Eliot, 4 quartets is his best work. But the general public, the world accepts The Wasteland. The world, according to the reading public, it is The Wasteland which is his greatest work. But as per T.S. Eliot version, he considers the 4 quartets his best work. And he said once that The emotional springs of his poems come from America. So remember who said that the emotional springs of his poems come from America. That is T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot. And his usual themes in his poems include alienation, time, mortality, regeneration, tranquility, etc. So remember the themes generally seen in T.S. Eliot's works. The problems of alienation, time, mortality, regeneration, tranquility. And one of T.S. Eliot's biographies was written by Peter Ackroyd. Peter Ackroyd is a writer himself, so he wrote the biography of T.S. Eliot. Another writer, Peter Ackroyd. And T.S. Eliot first attended Smith Academy, a boys' college under the Washington University. So under the Washington University, America, he attended the Smith Academy, a boys' college. Then he studied at Harvard College from 1906 to 1909, earning a Bachelor of Arts and his master's degree. Then from Harvard he earned his bachelor degree and his master's degree. And from Harvard, he also studied Indian philosophy and Sanskrit. So from Harvard University, he studied Indian philosophy and Sanskrit. And he is deeply influenced by Indic traditions, notably the Upanishads. He is inspired by the words of or the philosophy from the Upanishads, especially Indian philosophy. His doctoral dissertation for Harvard University was titled Knowledge and Experience in a Philosophy of F.H. Bradley. So remember, his doctoral thesis was titled Knowledge and Experience in the Philosophy of F.H. Bradley. And he once said that, I hate university towns and university people who are the same everywhere, with pregnant wives, sprawling children, many books and a hideous picture on the wall. Oxford is very pretty, but I don't like to be dead. So important to remember the quote. I hate university towns and university people who are the same everywhere, with pregnant wives, sprawling children, many books and hideous pictures on the walls. Oxford is very pretty, but I don't like to be dead. According to T.S. Eliot. And for a while, he worked as a school teacher. And in 1914, he met the famous American poet Ezra Pound. And T.S. Eliot moved to England in 1914 at the age of 25. So at the age of 25, he met Ezra Pound, that is 1914. And he also shifted to England in the same year, 1914. This date is very important, remember. And he became a British citizen in 1927 at the age of 39, subsequently renouncing his American citizenship. So he became a British citizen in 1927. And I remember another curious thing about T.S. Eliot. He was the first person to use the word bullshit in a poem titled The Triumph of Bullshit. So remember his poem, The Triumph of Bullshit, from which comes the word bullshit. So he is the originator of the word bullshit. And Eliot, as a poet, first attracted widespread attention for his poem titled The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which was published in 1915. So remember Eliot's first widespread attention he got from the public or the readers for his collection, for his work, the poem titled The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock in 1915. And T.S. Eliot, besides writing poetry, he has written 7 plays. Remember the names of his 7 plays? Zvene Agonistus, Murder in the Cathedral, The Rock, The Family Reunion, The Cocktail Party, The Confidential Clerk, and the 7th place, The Elder Statesman. So remember the 7 plays written by T.S. Eliot: Svene Agonistus, Murder in the Cathedral, The Rock, The Family Reunion, The Cocktail Party, The Confidential Clerk, and The Elder Statesman. And he said about his interest of writing plays, he once said that every poet would like, I fancy, to be able to think that he had some direct social utility. He would like to be something of a popular entertainer and be able to think his own thought behind a tragic or a comic mask. He would like to convey the pleasures of poetry not only to a larger audience but to large groups of people collectively, and the theatre is the best place in which to do it. So about his interest in writing plays, T.S. Eliot says that every poet would like, I fancy, to be able to think that he had some direct social utility. He would like to be something of a popular entertainer and be able to think his own thoughts behind a tragic or a comic mask. He would like to convey the pleasures of poetry not only to a larger audience but to larger groups of people collectively. And the theatre is the best place in which to do it. So he feels that drama or plays, have more acceptance or more reach than poetry. And he also coined the term objective correlative. Objective correlative is a phrase coined by T.S. Eliot, and it means a group of things or events which systematically represent emotions. So according to him, through poetry or any drama or anything, the emotions or the inner turmoil of the character should be expressed using some external objects, events, things, and such a kind of ideas. So that is what objective correlative. What we can say, fruitful conveying of one's emotion through objects, events, etc. Eliot's most famous critical works, criticism. His contribution to criticism include Tradition and the Individual Talent, Hamlet and His Problems, The Metaphysical Poets, Poetry and Drama, The Possibility of Poetic Drama. So these are his critical works. Remember, Tradition and the Individual Talent, Hamlet and His Problems, The Metaphysical Poets, Poetry and Drama, The Possibility of a Poetic Drama. And T.S. Eliot won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. T.S. Eliot won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948. And the same year he received the Order of Merit. The Order of Merit, 1948. And also the Nobel Prize for Literature. And in 1950, he got Tony Award for Best Play for the Broadway production of The Cocktail Party. For his play, The Cocktail Party, in 1950, T.S. Eliot received the Tony Award. And T.S. Eliot's work, All the Possum's Book of Practical Cats, is a collection of comic poems, and which is the basic for the successful Broadway play Cats. The Broadway production play company, they produced one play titled Cats. So this play was inspired by T.S. Eliot's collection of poems, comic poems titled All the Possum's Book of Practical Cats. Collection of comic poems is the basis for the successful Broadway play production, that is titled Cats. And T.S. Eliot died in London in 1965 of emphysema. It's a type of respiratory disease. So he died of emphysema in 1965 while he was in London. And his ashes were taken to St. Michael's Church, East Corker. And his epitaph line is a quotation from his poem, East Corker. And my beginning is my end. And my end is my beginning. So his original epitaph on the East Corker tombstone is a quotation from his own poem titled East Corker. So he had written a poem titled East Corker, and one of the lines is taken from it in order to use as his epitaph lines. So the line is, in my beginning is my end, and my end is my beginning. And in Poet's Corner, he has an epitaph, he has a tombstone. He was actually buried in St. Michael's Church, East Corker. But in Poet's Corner, he has a memorial epitaph. So in that epitaph, the lines from his poem, Little Gidding, appears. So Little Gidding, his poem, and from that, taken the lines for his Poet's Corner epitaph. The lines are, the communion of the dead is tongued with the fire beyond the language of the living. So remember the Little Gidding lines for his Poet Corner epitaph. The communication of the dead is tongued with the fire beyond the language of the living. The critic Charles Powell was negative in his criticism of T.S. Eliot as a writer. So Charles Powell called him T.S. Eliot's poems incomprehensible. So Charles Powell says that T.S. Eliot's poems are not understandable, not good, according to Charles Powell. Anthony Julius wrote the work titled T.S. Eliot, Anti-Semitism and the Literary Form. So Anthony Julius wrote a critical work titled T.S. Eliot, Anti-Semitism and the Literary Form. Anthony Julius. Now analyze the famous works of T.S. Eliot. First of all, his prose works. The Birds of Prey, A Tale of a Whale, The Man Who Was King, The Wine and the Puritans, The Point of View, Gentleman and a Seaman, Egoist. So prose works include The Birds of Prey, A Tale of a Whale, The Man Who Was King, The Wine and the Puritans, The Point of View, Gentleman and a Seaman, Egoist. And his famous poems include A Fable for Feasters, a lyric If Time and Space as Sages Say, a Graduation 1905, song If Space and Time as Sages Say, Before Morning, Circe's Palace, song When We Come Home Across the Hill, On a Portrait, song The Moonflower Opens to the Month, Nocturne, Humoresque, Spleen, Glass Ode, The Death of Saint Narcissus, Prufrock and Other Observations, a love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Portrait of a Lady, Preludes, Rhapsody on a Windy Night, Morning at the Window, The Boston Evening Transcript, Aunt Helen, Cousin Nancy, Mr. Apollinax, Hysteria, Conversation Gallant, La Figlia Che Bianca, Gerontion, Bombang with a Bedgar, Blastein with a Cigar, Sweeney Erect, A Cooking Egg, Lee Director, Melange Adulta de Dot, Luna de Maya, The Hippopotamus, Dance Lee Rastrum, Whispers of Immortality, Mr. Eliot's Sunday Morning Service, Sweeney Among the Nightingales, The Wasteland, The Hollow Man, Aerial Poems, Johnny of the Magi, A Song for Simon, Animula, Marina, Triumphal March, The Cultivation of Christmas Trees, Macavity, The Mystery Cat, Ash Wednesday, Coriolan, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, A Marching Song of the Pollicle Dogs and Billy Macaw, The Remarkable Parrot in the Queen's Book of the Red Cross, 4 quartets. So these are his poems or poetry and poems and also poetry collections. Let's read once more. First of all, his first poem, A Fable for Feasters, a lyric, If Time and Space as Sages Say, a Graduation 1905, song If Space and Time as Sages Say, Before Morning, Circe's Palace, song When We Came Home Across the Hill, On a Portrait, song The Moonflower Opens to the Moth, Nocturne, Humorous, Spleen, Glass Ode, The Death of Saint Narcissus, Prufrock and Other Observations, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Portrait of a Lady, Preludes, Rhapsody on a Windy Night, Morning at the Window, The Boston Evening Transcript, Aunt Helen, Cousin Nancy, Mr. Apollinax, Hysteria, Conversation Gallant, La Figlia Che Bianca, Gerontion, Bobbang with a Bereka, Blastein with a Cigar, Sweeney Erect, A Cooking Egg, Lead Director, Melange Adulta de Tot, Luna de Mayo, The Hippopotamus, Dan's Leave Restaurant, Whispers of Immortality, Mr. Eliot's Sunday Morning Service, Sweeney Among the Nightingales, The Wasteland, The Hollow Man, Aerial Poems, Journey of the Magi, The Song for Simon, Animula, Mariana, Triumphal March, The Cultivation of Christmas Trees, Macavity, The Mystery Cat, Ash Wednesday, Coriola, All Possum's Book of Practical Cats, The Marching Song of the Pollicle Dogs and Billy Macaw, The Remarkable Parrot in the Queen's Book of the Red Cross. The Marching Song of the Pollicle Dogs and Billy Macaw, The Remarkable Parrot in the Queen's Book of the Red Cross. And then the four quartets. Now let's analyze his non-fiction works. Some of his non-fiction works, famous works include The Second Order Mind, Tradition and the Individual Talent, The Sacred Wood, Essays on the Poetry and Criticism, Hamlet and His Problems, Homage to John Dryden, Shakespeare and the Stoicism of Seneca, For Lancelot and Truce, Dante, The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism, After Strange Gods, Essays Ancient and Modern, The Idea of a Christian Society, The Choice of Kipling's Verse, Notes Towards the Definition of Culture, The Frontiers of Criticism, On Poetry and Poets, To Criticize the Critic. So these are his famous non-fiction works, including essays. Once more, The Second Order Mind, Tradition and Individual Talent, The Sacred Wood, Essays on Poetry and Criticism, Hamlet and His Problems, Homage to John Dryden, Shakespeare and the Stoicism of Seneca, For Lancelot and Truce, Dante, The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism, After Strange Gods, Essays Ancient and Modern, The Idea of a Christian Society, A Choice of Kipling's Verse, Notes Towards the Definition of Culture, The Frontiers of Criticism, On Poetry and Poets, To Criticize the Critic. So that's all for today. In the next class, we will discuss one of Sophocles' most famous plays, most famous Theban plays, titled Oedipus Rex, or we can also title it as Oedipus Tyrannus or Oedipus the King.